Waldorf University is committed to providing high-quality, affordable education in a flexible online format so you can reach your higher education goals on a fire department schedule. They offer over 130 fully online degrees with programs at every level designed to meet the needs of fire professionals. Their fire science alumni includes all ranks of the fire and municipality leadership. Waldorf University is now offering 20% off of tuition for all Blue Card ICs. Go to waldorf.edu/blue-card for all the details.
Welcome to the B-Shifter podcast. Got John Vance, Chris Stewart, and Josh Blum here with us today. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you.
It's nice to be here.
Nice to be seen.
It's nice to be able to be on here.
Yeah, it is. We have a good topic for you today. We will be talking about who is training your firefighters. So stick around for that and find out what the guys have to say. And of course, we always welcome your comments. Look at our show notes and send us emails. The other thing we're going to ask you to do here at the top is like and subscribe if you enjoy our podcast. That helps us out quite a bit when you do that. So please do. How are you doing today in Cincinnati there, Josh?
I'm doing really good.
Yeah.
Busy day catching up on my computer work stuff, and talked to a bunch of agencies today. And I was talking to Jen in the office. Lots of organizations getting prices, wanting to come online, trying to figure it out. What's the blue card thing really mean? So yeah, that's all good. And our schedule, we're already in that position in the calendar of what works for us and what works for the organization for us to get to them in 2026. So I think I had 3 fire departments today. We're trying to get their trainers booked, and it's pretty much so May and beyond, though we got some flexibility in there for workshops for sure that we could plug in. But as far as trainers go, we got a week or two maybe before May. But if you're looking for any flexibility and getting dates, it's really May and beyond. So if you're looking for a trainer regionally, reach out and we'll try to get it on the books for you. So.
And one of the things that we do want to let everybody know too is we have some dates in Phoenix that are open. So you can go to bshifter.com, go to our events, and you'll be able to sign up there. Phoenix is lovely in January. So if you're from a cold location, you can come in here, do class all day. We'll get you out in time so you can enjoy a little evening of nice weather before you come back to the next class. So it's a great environment. Plus the AVBCTC is the world-class command training center. Go to bluecardtraining.com or bshifter.com and you can get signed up for that. How are you doing, Chris? What's going on with you?
Darn good. It'd be nice to have a bunch of people come out in January and February. You can wear shorts to the trainer here in Phoenix. It's a good time.
Yeah. Always shorts and sweater weather, or sweatshirt weather, which I enjoy immensely. Well, today's topic is talking about who is training your firefighters. And where do we start on the training, and who would like to kick this topic off here and talk about why this is an important consideration for chiefs, for training officers, operations chiefs, because I've been victim of it myself as a chief, where we've sent somebody to class and they come back either brainwashed or with a completely different vision and idea of what the fire department really should be doing.
Well, I think I could throw out a few topics like that we could address throughout this, and I don't know, maybe we might not get to them all. It might end up having to be part 2, but I think first of all is we all have to get into the mindset of being lifelong learners, not one and done. And we've all lived through that and gone to a class 20 years ago, and you think you remember it 20 years later, and it's like that's not an ideal thing. And then the whole point of who's training the fire department's your personnel internally within your organization, like who are those people? And, with that, you have to think about the formal and informal instructors, if you will, right? Like Chris is teaching something. This is the way we're going to do it at the Phoenix Fire Department, but Joe has a better idea and he tells people his way. So that's a part of it. And then I think another one is the hosted trainings when you bring somebody into your organization to present. So like looking at that, their background, are they even instructors at their own organization? And what they're coming to teach, do they even in any way, shape, or form do that at their organization when you're bringing somebody in from the outside? And then the last one is that outside training when you're sending somebody out to, a class somewhere on the road, a workshop, sending them to one of the conferences, whatever, making sure that what you're committing to send them to, or whatever you're committing to get them trained up or educated on, aligns with your fire department's really your mission, vision, and values, all of them. Because so often I think people end up going to a training and it's an excellent training on maybe how to do something, but it doesn't align in any way, shape, or form with their organization's deployment model, or really the expectations of the fire department when the bell rings. So this this topic's got thousands of points, I think, and I think we really also have to hit on the training versus education, because when we send somebody to training, I think that's how do you do something, and then the education is where it really comes into the why are we doing what we're doing. And I mean, we could talk about everything from how we load hose on the fire truck and how we deploy hose to, now, you name it, all of it, right? So I think there's a bunch of different parts and pieces there, and I think we all have to have the understanding and lay out that expectation when we send people to training, or we bring people in, that are we bringing them in because this is what we're going to do, or are we bringing them in because this is just an idea and we want to hear some of their things, and we'll hash it out after they leave of what we're actually going to do. But far too often since 1990, I've been hearing friends, colleagues, whatever, go to something and they come back and they try to institute or play out whatever skill it is that they were taught at some training. And it's like, that's not going to work here. And you just learned that last week, and you're trying to make a solution fit where that problem that you're trying to solve doesn't even exist. So I think it's a super broad topic. So I just wanted to throw that out there to kind of get it started. But it starts, I think, with the organization of what are we going to send our folks to, and who are we going to have coming here to train our people. And it can't be, well, this guy's super cool, so I'm having him come in here because he'll get our morale all up and he'll tell everybody how great they are and whatever. It's got to fix our organization or your organization's, expectations and deployment.
In any organization right now, if you're not prepared for your members to receive or your ability to process some form of outside training for you and your members and your department, you are ill prepared as an organization. Because right now, given social media, YouTube, all the other platforms where it's available, like daily, and you're not ready, or you haven't thought about whether they're getting it, how they're getting it, what they're doing with it, and actually preparing for that, you're in trouble, right? And so my first message would be to start to get a grip of it, right? Because it's happening. It's already left the barn. You need to get your shit together, really. But then having a perspective of how valuable some of this training actually can be. I came from an organization and with a fire chief who, very specifically looked me in the eye and said, "Hey man, an education is people and places. One of the most critical forms of education is people and places. So going places, learning things, talking to people, all of that's incredibly important." And then I also worked in a fire department where we conducted, I think at our peak, 3 conferences a year, where people were coming in from all over the fire department to listen to whatever it is that we were talking about, or the folks that we had brought in, what they were talking about. And so, there were a lot of people that took that information back and they tried to then operationalize it and figure out how if and how that could actually work for them. So I guess I've seen all sides of it and obviously participating in it now. Heck, we're talking on this podcast today. It's part of the lexicon of this whole deal. Is we need to start to come to terms with it, recognize its value, recognize its threat, and then be able to start to manage it. So this topic of who is actually training your folks is incredibly important. And this is a vetting skill now that departments and training officers and company officers and anybody that's responsible for anybody else in a fire department needs to start actually thinking about, realizing and recognizing, because there are so many forms of training, available to us, and what is what is usable and what isn't, and what is nonsense and what isn't is all really, really important.
Well, how do we go about validating who the instructor is, the message they're sending? How does it align with your department's vision and mission? And then how do we validate the topic too, whether it's needed or not? Maybe that's a good spot to start.
I think one thing starting is we have to, if we're going to send people out, it's sometimes it's hard to read a description and see exactly what something is, unless it's a full certification where there's a ton of information available and here's the objectives that you're going to go through and here's what you're going to be evaluated on. If you're sending somebody to, a 2-day or 3-day, training that's one and done, it's kind of hard to see through all the lines, I guess, if you will, of what's going to come out of that. So I think a piece is, if you're going to send people outside, is you got to take the good and you got to leave the bad, or you got to take what works for us and leave what doesn't work for us. But that you have to be able to see through the message. And we also have to communicate, I think, internally with our people that we're going to send, personnel that we're going to send to training, that just because we're sending you there does not mean that we're endorsing whatever was taught there to be used here, which comes back to your organization's, deployment model and expectations and how do you really operate at ABC Fire Department. So I think far too often people go to a training and we see this all over the place. And we see it every week, I think, everywhere that we go and do training, that they went somewhere a month ago and picked something up and they tried to use a skill and it didn't work. And it's like, well, it didn't work because they taught you how to do whatever it was, everything from task level to tactical level to you're the IC, and you were trying to, again, apply a solution to a problem that didn't exist. And, we see that. And Bruno, I think, always used to basically call that the detour. Instead of looking at what the real problem is and going directly to solving the problem, we did 25 other things because, somebody told us we could or we should, or I know this skill, so that's just what I'm going to do. And we don't start with that thinking component of solving the problem. So I think internal within the organization, we have to start with all of those things of making sure our people and our personnel understand training that's being delivered, from somebody coming from the outside in or sending people out to an outside training. Is we may entertain the ideas that come back from it because there's a lot of really good things out there and we need to, change and stay current, but it doesn't mean you're going to come back and we're just going to start doing that that next day.
Yeah. I kind of look at, there's two lanes here for that training where folks are going outside of the organization to go to a training or attend a class or a conference or whatever. There are the ones where the department is actually going to fund and they're purposely and deliberately sending, the members there and giving them the time off and paying for whatever it is they're going to pay for. And they're basically sponsoring them to go to that. And that needs to come with some responsibilities for those members that are attending it from the organization. Hey, we're sending you to this. And when you come back, we would like some form of organized, cogent thoughts on what it is you actually did, what you actually learned, what you see of value, what you didn't see of value, and then how does that connect to the way we do business, whether it's from a procedural standpoint, a resource standpoint, a response and deployment standpoint? And then we can evaluate that as an organization. And I certainly want those individuals' input that participated in that. But there's some decisions that have to get made. Is, all right, hey, is that worth sharing to the rest of the organization? Is that worth adopting into the way we do our work, or even potentially changing policy and procedure on that type of stuff? That's pretty important. But right now, because of the sheer volume of training that's available, there's a significant amount of folks who are attending these on their own dime, on their own time, under their own, their own motivation, I guess, if it is the right way to put that. And they don't feel necessarily a connection to their organization. Maybe the organization doesn't send them. Maybe the individuals are frustrated by that, or they're just, they're hard chargers and go-getters, and they want to go to as much as they can. So awesome. I think all of it's great. But those folks that go to that, then they harbor and hold that information, and there isn't any obligation or coordination or recognition and responsibility of how that's going to come back and get shared. That may get shared with them and their peers. That may get shared with them at the company level. It may not go beyond that. And sometimes it can be very valuable things, and sometimes it can be very, very harmful things to an organization, right? And things that definitely go a counterflow to the way that their standards normally operate. And so organizations need to be prepared to deal with that and work with that. And, I'm not a person who feels as if we need a policy on everything. And in fact, I'm probably quite the contrary. But there needs to be, I'm going to connect this to the silverback stuff, right? If there's a solid organizational push and an organizational demand and for effective quality training and quality operations, and the bosses are engaged in the work and they're interested in the training that the firefighters are getting, then there's a high likelihood that comes back and that gets used in a very organized, standard way, right? And it's not a disruption. But if you're disengaged from your members, you're disengaged from the work, you're disengaged from what's happening in the American Fire Service, then you are on a regular basis are going to be surprised by the things that your members go out and get trained on and learn and try and bring back to your organization, maybe oftentimes because you're not providing anything for them. And so there are these two distinct lanes where I think this is really running, and organizations really need to improve how they're going to deal with both potentials with that. And then the vetting of the instructors. My example, a flyer pops up just a week ago in my region here for this training. It's actually sent to me by one of the guys who's putting it together. Says, hey, we'd love to have some of your folks here. Cool. I read it. I'm interested in it. But I have questions. And so I pick up the phone and I call. Hey, what's going on? Hey, what are you doing? Who's teaching it? What benchmarks you're using, what information do you have for them, so that I can start to figure out, do I want to spend department resources to actually send them to this, and how am I going to use and synthesize that information that they get and bring back to the organization, because I don't want it to be disruptive. And I also like sending my folks to training. That makes them feel good about being engaged in the fire service. So yeah, do the homework. Pick your phone up. If you don't know, and if they're going across the country, pick your phone up and call somebody and ask them, hey, hey, I saw your training. What's going on? What are you teaching? Who is teaching it? What is the foundation of it? And if they can't or won't give you that information and can't and provide that stuff to you, it's likely not a class you want to send your folks to. Right? If you can't be transparent about what and how you're going to teach somebody something to an organization, then that's, to me, in my eyes, that's super problematic.
Chris, I think everything you just hit there really just goes back to that standard and consistent thing as a part of it, right? Like are they going to deliver this in a standard and consistent way? So organizationally thinking about, does it fit what we're really looking for? But then the second part of it is, I can't send, if I have if I have 100 that I'm going to send to something, I can't send 5 to this one and hear from ABC and send 5 more to somebody else to hear about something else just because I'm checking a box of example fire officer 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's everywhere from 80 hours to 200 hours and being delivered all online to all in person to you can put, a bunch of different classes together and get the certificate at the end of it. Every training is like that, right? So it's like, what is really going to come out of that? And then I think thinking about that thing is it going to help us improve our skills? And then is this consistent with what we do? And then how does it align with our productivity or effectiveness when the bell rings?
Well, I'm surprised how many people are teaching classes out there. They go outside their department and they're the quote unquote experts, but their own department will not allow them to teach. Have you seen that? I mean, I think that's a red flag, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a red flag, but oftentimes on the surface, we don't know what it's a red flag for, because I have seen instances where the person that is actually teaching that is way outside of their organizational standards, way outside of what is acceptable inside their organization. And they have, they feel like their opinion's much more important than the organizational opinion for them. But then I've also seen instructors get vilified in their own organization and because they're challenging their own system. And then the only way they can participate and the only way they feel engaged is actually going outside of their system to teach. So I don't know that it's necessarily a guaranteed red flag or a guaranteed, oh yeah, don't go there, or this is going to be a hot mess. But again, it's that evaluation. Is the nice thing about the fire service now and how connected we are is you can find somebody who knows somebody that can give you information and give you answers about what's going on there, what's going to be taught, what's their history, where are they from, all of those things. What's their organizational position? Are they teaching something that is at their organizational level? Or are they, or do you have firefighters teaching people what the incident commander should know and do? Those things are not very well connected, and those to me are a red flag. So I think on the instructor end of it, we need to be more deliberate and more proactive as the people that are responsible for training in our organizations. And if they're going and you're not sure, or you're concerned, or you're like, ooh, shit, then I need to do my homework and I need to call and figure that out. Because how many people in all of the trainers that we do hear that, oh, wow, blue card's not what everybody else made it out to be. Well, yeah, that happens a lot, right? So all systems can be victims of this type of mentality or generalization and all that type of stuff. So let's be adults and actually start figuring out, okay, where are they going? What are they doing? I'm not going to send my kids someplace that I think is screwed up. Or if I have questions, I'm going to call and make sure that I feel comfortable doing it. And if I'm not going to send them, right? I have no different feeling about taking care of my firefighters that way and supporting them in the places they should go and telling them, hey man, I'm concerned about you going there. I realize you're going on your own time and dime and all that other stuff, but I don't, they've actually injured people at that training before. I'm concerned. I actually am concerned about you. I don't want the same thing happening to you. So I think there's a varying perspective there that we have to consider.
I think going back to this, the training and education part of it, and I mean, and they're so close, but they're really so far apart. So that, the training part of the skills is fantastic. And we know thousands of people on the road teaching skills, right? That are fantastic, none better. And, maybe it's a time constraint or whatever, but a missing component to so much training is the why part of it. And they just think when you send personnel or they choose to go to this training, they think that's the way that it is, especially when organizations send someone to a training. They're like, well, the organization sponsored this and sent me to this. So this is the way that it is. And this is what we do. But we all know that there's a huge component missing of why do we do that? And, if we want to we could jump right to command training. And Chris, you traveling around the country now, but working in the land of milk and honey at the Phoenix Fire Department with staffing, something we hear all the time is we're not the Phoenix Fire Department. We don't have all that staffing. We can't do all of this. We don't have a command van. How did we possibly set up a command team? How would you ever get 3 people in a car? How would you, whatever? And, one thing I think that one thing that we do with that is we talk about the why do you fill those positions and how do you adjust it to have that work in your region, right? So all the suburban work that we do, as soon as you pull that map out and you draw a circle that's as big as the Maricopa County response area or the Phoenix Fire Department's response area, and it's like, well, you guys got 15 chiefs on duty right there. You could get the chiefs there, right? But you talk to them about why it's important to get them there, and then you show them that it can be done. But on the flip, if we didn't do that, people would leave and say, well, we're not the Phoenix Fire Department. We couldn't possibly do that because we can't get that many people there. And it's like, well, you can. The model just looks different of how you get them there. Your deployment model, just looks different. So, we do command training and decision making and Mayday management and division ops and big box and all of those things. And with all of those parts and pieces, we always talk about why. So it's both training and education, because we always tie it back to, the latest science or standards or actual events that have happened. It's not it's not that you're the Ken doll, just say what I told you to say, right? And we're suffering through that still now because it's not don't have anything to do, well, it has everything to do with communications too, but that's just a very small part of the program. But when people leave and they're like, oh, it's just a communications thing, it's like, well, you missed it, because it's not just a communications thing, right? The communications is just where you're acting out that piece of it. And I think that's where it was, that's a training thing. I just need you to do what I told you to do. And they don't understand why. But I think when we educate them and they get to understand why, then that's where that critical thinking, and they put that hat on of, okay, what is the problem? And then what's standing in the way of us solving the problem? Not, this is just the way that you do it every time. We have a system that's standardized, but the system has the strategic decision-making model so that you can make decisions to solve the problem, because everything's different, right?
Had a guy this week just talk to me about a situation because they do command training on a shift. He said our company officers are really good. It's like a 7 or 8 station fire department with 1 battalion on duty. The battalion will not train with them. So the battalion gets there and he does his minimum blue card training, but the ongoing discussions that the shift has. So how do you overcome that if you have especially with command training, if you have a chief level officer that is your response chief, but they're not training with you?
This is one of the most critical skills that firefighters and company officers and just anybody who's responsible for anybody else in a fire department needs to start to learn, is you have to figure out ways to manipulate and trick people into doing the things that you want and need them to do, right? And so if you have a boss that's not participating with you in the critical training that you need, especially somebody who's going to be your shift BC, going to be your IC number 2, then you need to figure out ways to actually get them involved without saying, maybe stopping short of saying, hey, you need to train with us more, is start asking questions. Like, hey, this is what we have going on. This was an incident that we actually had. Well, how do you see it? This is what we thought. This is what we did. This is the way we were going to set this up. These were the actions we were going to take. What do you think? And draw them into the conversation, because it doesn't necessarily have to be formal. It doesn't necessarily have to be, planned. But if you get them involved in the simple things, and even if it's at the dinner table, start that conversation there, that can be an incredibly important training opportunity that, wasn't planned or structured inside the organization, but it turns into something very valuable. So this is where the officers and the firefighters have to start to lead up. They have to start to draw their boss in. And I'll be honest with you. You start to manipulate your boss to help you actually be better at your job. trick them into doing their job, right? And be able to, improve that. And trust me, there are some people that are even impervious to that. They're absolutely disengaged and they're complete slugs and they're not going to do it. Then you have a whole different problem on your hands, but that's there's other methods to deal with those people. But this is be upfront and serious. And it's hard for the majority of bosses who generally want to do a good job, but maybe don't know how to actually help them get engaged and break that down, because they may be scared to death to talk to you. I don't know. That I think that's a real possibility, though. And bring them in, suck them in, and you can do that. I know Eric Phillips has some fantastic examples of things that he's actually done to draw other people in, other bosses, his boss, into what it is that they have going on at the company level. And then next thing you know, it's happening at the battalion level. Next thing you know, it's, hey, everybody on this shift, and it grows organically that way, right? So sometimes you're not have to be so overt and force and push, but draw them in and use some Jedi mind tricks, and you can find yourself being pretty successful that way.
And with all training, no matter how it is, that's a difficult one if your boss isn't participating. But like Chris said, I think there's still a way to get them to do it. I mean, maybe they are scared to death to come because they aren't confident in their skills or whatever, which is really scary if they won't come to training. But sometimes I think that's some underlying things of the culture of the organization, that if Chris shows up to this training, we're going to eat him today. And it's like, well, education and training can't be hazing. That has to be there because we're trying to do better, that we're trying to get everybody on the same page. It all comes down to the service, right? We're all trying to provide the best service we can possibly provide. And, IC number 2 is providing customer service, quite frankly, to, I know people don't like this sometimes, the internal customer, which is all those firemen that are there taking care of them so that they can take care of Mrs. Smith, out on the fire ground. But if there's a separation of that division and the companies are always, or vice versa, if they can't get along and they're always eating each other in the firehouse, you're not going to be very successful in training. It's that thing of getting everybody on the same page. And then I think taking little wins, right? Like take littler steps and get some wins and get people comfortable with what's going on and everybody getting on the same page, and then just keep growing it from there. You can't jump right into, we're going to do Mayday training if they struggle with command transfer and managing 4 companies. So that's the education and training part of it, right? Like some people learn at different paces, different knowledge, skill, and abilities. So I think we have to tie all of that together.
Yeah, there's, I think another part of this is if you're a training boss, an ops boss, a fire chief, and you in any way get the sense that the people that you've put in charge to be battalion chiefs aren't engaging in training the way they should, then that's a fire chief, ops chief, training chief problem. They have a malfunction that they're not setting clear expectations for the folks that they're putting in the positions to be battalion chiefs to engage in that training. The expectation is that they are leaders and organizational leaders, specifically in the performance, behavior, and capability of those folks that they're there to manage, right? So at that battalion chief level, if they're not doing it, and the bosses are okay with them not doing it, it's not a battalion chief problem. It's a fire department fire chief problem. And we do see that regularly, unfortunately, right? Especially because we deal with a lot of folks who are trying to change their organization from the middle rather than the top down. And so we've got to, we can't walk past that and not call that out for what it is, because it's 100% legitimate and true in many instances. And if you're a fire company that has that problem and you have the access to people above your boss, sometimes you're going to need to communicate that above your boss, but don't do that first. Try and get them engaged and try and help them do the right thing. But if they're not doing it, then use other means.
Yeah, so that whole topic is specifically on that internal piece, right? Like who's training and how's the training going internally in your organization, and we do see that all the time. at organizations as we travel around the country that three engines and a truck show up to their burn building, that's at their training center, which is where we do a ton of our stuff, at the classroom or whatever, and you happen to be outside or look out and see them, and the chiefs are there having a coffee clutch, in their white shirts hanging out holding court while the companies are training. And it's like, well, that's the opportunity to fix it. And then, oftentimes from that, the next piece comes that one of those companies isn't doing what they're supposed to do, because people are going to perform. Oftentimes people are only going to perform at that lowest level of what's acceptable. And if they see that, well, the chiefs aren't training, then I'm not going to train either. Well, the chiefs are here and they're supposed to be doing this drill, and they should be fully packed out, geared up for what we're doing with this exercise, but they're not doing anything. It's like, well, the next time, the good people are always probably going to do what they need to do most of the time, but that other percentage is going to start to go that same direction. And then you have, half the people that are at the exercise or at this training not doing what they're supposed to do. And, I think that comes back to that expectation thing and holding people accountable for the expectations that were laid out. So if the training division puts something out and says, this is what we're going to do, or operations puts it out and says, this is what we're going to do, then that's what we're going to do. And I think that we have to check in so often and verify that that's not happening. And when it's not happening, we need to do something about that internally, because that I see that going on right now around our region sometimes with people that show up, and it's floated down to some captains now go to training and get off the truck. And it's like, well, you have to have all your PPE on for this. And they're like, oh, my firemen are just doing it. And it's like, no, you work with them. You're part of the company, and the company works together. And, sometimes it's that comment of, well, the chiefs are supposed to be playing a role in this, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So we're going to do what we do. So yeah, that's got to be addressed as well.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I used to see at our academy, and by favorite things, I mean one of the things I hate the absolute most, is companies that would, be in the area of our training academy, come down on the weekends or afternoons or whenever it was quiet, and they would be training. And I would watch a company, a 4 or 5 person company, drilling with their probationary firefighter, and the only person that has their gear on doing anything is a probationary firefighter. And there's 3 or 4 other dudes standing around watching that person do whatever it is that they're doing. That ain't training. That isn't teaching. That's not education. That's not nothing. That's making them come down and do shit that you want them to do. That's probably could fit the definition of slavery, right? Mm-hmm. And so that if we have that at the company level, you probably have that at the battalion level. If you have that at the battalion level, you probably have that at the shift or organizational level, right? So you've got a whole host and stream of malfunctions that actually need to be fixed. And that's typically fixed top down, not bottom up. And that becomes really important to deal with and recognize. And that can be a really hard, uncomfortable lesson for a department or departmental leaders to actually learn, to become familiar with, learn, and then try and actually fix. But it's very much worth it. And if you have that malfunction inside your organization, sending people outside of your organization to do training is almost a surefire way to create more division, more failure, more crisis inside your organization. It's not going to be better just because they go out. So really, this is a centric issue, is if you're broken internally with regards to training, going outside your organization probably ain't going to fix it. The places that are functioning the best internally tend to be the departments that are doing best with external training, right? Not only in how they bring that and process that information, but where they send people to, how they vet that training, because they have a clear understanding of what's important and what isn't, right? So that internal stuff, and you said it, Josh, it's no different than customer service. If we can't be nice to each other, there is no way we're being nice to Mrs. Smith on a consistent basis. It ain't going to happen, right? So if we're ineffective, disorganized, dysfunctional in how we train inside our organization, top down, then we are going to be that way with processing and using information from outside of our organization. And that's going to do nothing but make firefighters and company officers who are, trying to gain information and get better at their job. It's just going to make them more and more frustrated, right? So we've got this chicken and egg thing going on here but the recognition here is you got to fix it inside before you can fix it outside.
Let's talk about Big Brother for a moment. We all have them. Josh coined that phrase for me a while back. So we have Big Brother in the sense of communities have that, bigger fire department they look up to. We wrote about it this week on bshifter.com. And then ultimately, there's some very well-known, very charismatic, very knowledgeable, skilled instructors that go out and they teach their message. But it's not scalable to hardly any other fire department out there other than their own. How do we overcome that?
It comes back to that validation. If they're going on their own, it's kind of hard to control it, right? I mean, we can control when they bring it back that this is how ABC Fire Department operates. This is what we're going to do. This is our deployment model. This is how many people we have. This is the equipment that's available. Just because you chose to go to a class or I sent you to a class doesn't mean when you come back that I can buy or, change our whole deployment model in 5 minutes. Now, like Chris said earlier, if you can justify and have a good reason why we should do something, that it's best practice, or I don't want to say that we were doing anything wrong, but that there's a better way, then yeah, we can look into that. But far too often that comes back to I work at the suburban fire department and I went to a class that the Big Brother fire department was teaching, and I want to be them. So then I try to bring that back to, my organization, and whether it's a equipment thing or a staffing thing, or in some cases, building construction, you name it, like things that are different. And I think a piece of that's missing is it's very easy to teach task level stuff. And it's hard and takes time to explain when and why we would do some of these, things that we do on the fire ground, whether it's command, whether it's, division ops is one of the things that I wrote down. Is like, there's so many places that you go and you take the 1-day class from somebody who's teaching division ops, and they believe that if I'm the division boss, that if I'm at a 2-story house on fire, that I, as a division boss, operate on the first floor of the house, and I'm division 1 and I'm responsible for 2 companies in there. And it's like, well, you're nothing more than a glorified fireman in there. And all you're telling all the firemen and the company officers in there is that you don't trust them. But we see that, right? And that's not the model, and it doesn't work. Now, in a lot of big cities, there's a layer of that they'll put a chief officer and their aide in a position inside the building like that, not in probably still in the warm zone, but they would operate there to gather more information or whatever that may be. But they're not the division boss. They're just operating with multiple other companies, maybe in a geographic area. We could put the FDNY, right? They'll put a chief on the roof to just see what's going on, and they're going to do a ton of work up there, and they got 5, 6, 7 companies maybe on the roof sometimes, open it up.
There's more companies on that roof that are on duty in 99% of the fire departments in the United States.
Right.
And I'm not begrudging the FDNY,
no,
but the reality is that, just what you said, Josh.
It's real, right? And it's like you can't take that back to ABC Suburban Fire Department that gets, 13 people in 17 minutes at a house on fire. But they try to emulate what they might have been told. And the other one I wrote down is the whole big box thing, right? This comes back to the who's teaching your fire department and what are you doing and what's the real message and what's best practice and what really works. And there's a big ass difference between the Stearns and Foster Bedding Company that was 2 blocks from my house my entire life, 5 to 7 stories, 2,000-foot long building with a basement that had, cotton in it for 120 years where they made mattresses, no sprinkler system except for, manually activated pipes that they could basically turn on, versus the new 1 million square foot Amazon distribution center. And I bring that up because, yeah, that old mill building down there, I don't know how, but it did not burn to the ground for 150 years, though there was a fire in it once a week. And, yeah, we stretched 2.5s in there and multiple hand lines. And it was, I remember there was times where the fire department was there for days. And it's like, well, if somebody's teaching you a class and they think that those tactics are what we would use at a big box Amazon distribution center that's fully sprinklered, that the only ones that have had any significant fire is the ones that the sprinkler system was shut off or the fire department shut off. Our training has to look totally different, right? Because the factors that are involved. But, we see it that there's 4 or 5 classes out there right now fighting fires in big boxes. And the first thing it says on there, big building, big hand line, smooth bore nozzles, reach. And, when we sit 7, 8, 9, 10 times a year with Shane Ray, and then with some of the burns we've done, it's like, no, the sprinkler system is containing the fire. And the worst thing we can do is start blasting water everywhere and blast the fire everywhere. But that's just a one little example, right? But we've had some of that in the Cincinnati area. People recently went to a class on fighting commercial building fires, and there was no differentiation between the 150-year-old old mill building and the building that was built last week that's 2.4 million square feet at the Greater Cincinnati Airport that's fully sprinklered, or the 1.4 million square foot Amazon distribution center that's in the city of Monroe, just 30 minutes from here, where they've had 3 working fires in there, and every single one of them has been extinguished by the sprinkler system. 2 of them on the top rack, 40 feet in the air, 1 of them on the very bottom rack, all of them contained, and the fire department put very little water on them. That's just a much different fire. But when you're taking this broad swipe of the brush of big building and that we do all these old school things, it just doesn't fit. So the organization needs to, vet that and then have a discussion with those people when they come back. And when they say, oh, we need to be stretching 2.5s into every one of these big box buildings, ask them why, and then have that conversation so they actually get educated on it, not just trained on, what that may look like.
Yeah, I think in a lot of these instances, we're confusing training for going to some type of spiritual revival. That it's in a tent in the middle of a frickin' field and James Brown's going to be the musical act and we're going in there to get pumped up and feel good and connect with our roots and somehow we're going to come away from this all knowing, all better, and I'm going to be able to work way faster if I don't wear bunker pants and all that other stuff that comes with this. We're confusing that with actually education and learning how to do something, and which doesn't have a whole lot of emotion tied to it necessarily. You feel good afterwards, like you actually learned something, or hey, I'm going to be better at being able to do XYZ, whatever it is. But if you're having to sell your training or what it is that you're going to do, or your firefighters need to feel connected in that spiritual way, then I'm not so sure that they're going to learn anything at all there if that's the case. So that goes to this whole idea, and the big box is a great example of that. There are so few people now with legitimate big box experience and legitimate big box experience in the offensive strategy, putting out an uncontained fire in a building that either did have sprinklers and they weren't working, or something that overran a sprinkler system. The case studies out there of folks who are being able to go in and do that in an offensive strategy in 1 or 2 work cycles of crews in their SCBA air and all that. The sample size of that is so incredibly small, if at all, that there isn't the ability to take this information, put it all together, and then be able to present it in this wide, broad perspective ideas of all right, American Fire Service, we've got this all solved. Come on in, let's talk about it. That doesn't exist right now. What we know is we're starting to know more about the systems. We're not starting to know how much more complicated these buildings are. We have case studies when we didn't use the systems effectively. And let's start plugging all that into effective risk management. And risk management is connected to taking risk for savable lives or savable property on this sliding scale based on what it is that we've evaluated. And now we're using a system and a process to actually make decisions and understand when and how we're going to do things versus this spiritual enlightenment conference that we're going to all do and then drink ourselves silly every night to be able to come away and feel like I got a t-shirt, I got the patch, and now I really know how to do it. They're not connected together in any real way. And again, that's part of an organization. If you're sending people to this stuff, vet it out. And if you don't know whether it's worthy of the vetting process, find somebody who you trust that can give you that information or help you make that decision, right? But there are so many folks out there that are talking about things that they have literally never done, or they've never been responsible for on the fire ground, or they've never been responsible for in a fire organization, and they've never actually had to answer to anybody and be responsible for the answer and the actions of that organization. That's all problematic, man. That is stuff that you end up in the newspaper. You end up talking to a lot of attorneys, and people end up losing their jobs, right? So we need to be really responsible for that, whether we're working in a fire department and helping our folks with that, or whether we're actually the people out there doing the training. And we need to have a sense of responsibility. I'm going to talk to you about stuff. That's why I feel so stinking comfortable teaching what we teach, because I know the foundation of it all. And it comes from reality. It comes from actual experience. And it was vetted through decades of evaluation of the system and an adjustment and maturity of that system. And so this is, we could get on a roll, big box. We could talk about Mayday stuff. We could talk about ventilation and truck work. We could talk about all of it and for what's necessary, what's important, and what isn't. And that's I don't think JV has enough tape for us to talk about all that.
Well, there are two things I'd like to get to before we wind down today. And we'll get to command training. Let's do command training toward the end of our discussion here. But rapid intervention training. I see this wide spectrum of rapid intervention training throughout our country. And some of it is stuff that's being taught, 20 years ago that we stopped doing 20 years ago that's still being taught, and then some state-of-the-art training. So how do we vet that? And really, let's talk about rapid intervention for a moment.
So I think the IAFF Fireground Safety and Survival Program, they've probably done the most research and group type work, developing and redeveloping that program and, tying in some of the things that they've tied into that program. But we see every single level of organizations that they go to some training on firefighter safety and survival, RIT, FAST, RAT, whatever you want to call it. And then that becomes like some kind of primary focus. And then they train their ass off on all of these things that an organization came up with that may or may not work, because most of those exercises were a result of a line of duty death. And then, in a training environment, they tried to come up with the best way to make something work. Whether you were talking about, the Denver drill, Coglanese drill, you name it, right? Doing that harder isn't the solution, right? So, I think more focus on staying out of those positions is important for, the RIT, RAT, FAST stuff. And we've seen quite a bit of transition on that. And then I don't know how many years ago it was now, 25 or so years ago, I guess, Cincinnati Fire Department sent 6 or 7 people to Chicago Fire Department when they were calling it RAT, Rapid Assistance Team Training, whatever, and brought it back. And, everybody went through it and a lot of it was turned into hazing for some people, I think, because some of it was like, this is nearly impossible. What you want to see happen. So I think with like research from all the stuff Don Abbott did, and then all the other data that's out there, we've seen this whole rat fast thing evolve a bit of what skills do we really need that are going to save fireman's life, and it starts with put the fire out. That's number one, and then don't put yourself in a position that you can't survive. And I know this job is, shit's going to happen, right? And potentially unexpected, but we can probably prevent 99% of it. So when we're looking at this whole written firefighter survival training, I think one, it has to be realistic. And then two, we should look at like, what are the skills that are being taught there? And is this, we're going to bring you here for 40 hours and whip your ass so that when you go home, you're like, holy shit, they tried to kill me there. And now I think I can survive anything because, I did survive this week. Or is there some real education and training and something that I can do something with when I leave? And, that's kind of my 2 cents. It went from like 30 hours of, mostly task level training to a lot of places it's, down to like a 12-hour, not for firefighter, say like survival stuff, but like RIT skill stuff, because some of it just isn't realistic, right? It's somebody had this idea and this is what I'm going to teach. And it's like, has anybody ever pulled this off before? And it's like, we can't find any documentation on it, but we're going to teach it anyway. And it's like, well, what is the best way and what does that really look like? And really the best way comes back to ideally put the fire out and it makes everything better. And then hopefully we don't get ourselves in that position. But there's still plenty of those classes out there that it's when you leave, you get the tattoo of I survived this training and now I'm Johnny Badass because I made it through.
I think that a lot of times when we start talking about Rick and Rit and all that, removing a down or trapped firefighter, that's really the work we're talking about, and whatever acronym we want to connect to it is knowing and understanding on the front end what actually causes that. Like you said, Josh, what situations are creating this that these firefighters are finding themselves in that position, and how do we stop and prevent and eliminate or decrease the opportunity for that happen? That is critical, and maybe more so than just about anything else. However, then let's look at the situations where we actually go in and try and locate, retrieve, remove firefighters. And what do those situations look like? How are they occurring? And what is typically the solution to those? When firefighters are lost and firefighters are running out of air, that oftentimes is one of the most difficult issues that we can possess. We have a hard time looking for people in large space areas and actually finding them and being successful at doing that without creating significant additional problems for every other firefighter that is going to go look for them. Case in point, the Worcester cold storage fire, right? That's a fantastic, incident case study to actually look at. And then what are the other situations? The other situations, structural collapse. You can look at Houston at the Southwest End fire. You can look at maybe most recently the apartments that collapsed in Columbia, South Carolina, and trapped I think it was a total of 4 members inside there, and they lost the one firefighter, right? When you look at all of those, the critical elements of the rescue involved there, there is a tremendous amount of work that is very specific to that incident, those critical factors, those critical elements of that, and the ability to be able to respond to it in some type of consistent way. And It's all incredibly difficult. There are so many situations, there are so many variables, and there's so many reasons why that these are happening that we are unable to build some consistent, this is the magic bullet for solving these types of Mayday incidents. So when we start to think that, well, we're going to position these companies in these places and they're going to do these things proactively beforehand, and they're going to be ready to respond to the Mayday. Great. Okay, if that's what you're choosing to do, but do you know how long it actually takes to put them in play? Do you know how long it actually takes for them to actually do the work that's going to be necessary? Do they have the resources and capability to actually be able to do that? And because there's going to be a lot of things that you don't know on the outside until you get to the inside. We're oftentimes trying to build this unsolvable problem to be able to solve in this RIC thing, because it's a big giant game that we end up playing, and again, looking for a magic bullet. And so when we spend time on the front end trying to prevent it, that's money very, very well spent, because we know the situations that create these for us. As we've said, we're not coming up with a whole bunch of new ways to die or unforeseen ways to kill firefighters on the fireground. And so let's spend time trying to prevent it. And then when we start working on the specific things to do when the Mayday happens, is what do we know are the most consistent ways people are getting rescued from Maydays? Focus on that, right? Every single one of them needs air. Every single one of them needs some sort of element to extract or extricate or unconnect them or make them unlost, right? Or be found. And so, okay, you can work on certain things, but to say that, all right, this is the way we do all of our rescue or our RIT or our RAT or whatever the hell we're going to call it, is we're bullshitting ourselves. We absolutely, and each other in that. So we need to be way more deliberate about what the work is, and all right, focus a little bit on the key, most important elements, but we turn it into games. There's literally contests now where you can go and see who's the fastest to do whatever rescue activity they can concoct. And I guess on the surface, I don't know if that's a horrible thing, but I don't think that's the solution to this whole to Mayday and issue at all, quite honestly.
Well, to wrap it up with command training, and I'm going to put you guys on the spot here because, really, the instructor cadre is Josh's responsibility. The curriculum is Chris's responsibility. How do you guys walk the walk with this organization and do exactly what we're talking about for everybody else?
Yeah, so I'll start this off. So I'd say every single day I get a phone call or some correspondence from somebody and tell me about Blue Card, tell me what Blue Card is, tell me what it's not. And, most of the time the people get way more information, I think, than they were really asking for. But, one thing is this system has been around and in thought, at least in process, since the 70s. So we're coming up on, over 50 years that this system has been being used in some form or fashion. And obviously Chief Bernasini, put all this together after he thought, as a fireman and a company officer at the Phoenix Fire Department, that they were trying to kill him because that's what it was.
They were.
It just wasn't there wasn't a system, right? And so we as an organization, stay tied to, and Chris is really one of the people connected to it. But what is best practice, and then staying connected to research, staying connected to the standards, and then staying connected to the 5,000 plus fire departments that use the system, and 70,000 something users that use the system, and listening to their feedback of what's going on. And then I think part of our proof in the pudding is, I think it's like 31 or 32 fire departments where we are after their line of duty death, and hundreds of fire departments after they had some kind of an event where firefighters were hurt or oftentimes hurt and didn't come back to work. And, we connect with those people and talk to them about how did it change their organization and how did it change their operation. And one of the things Chief Dyer at the Worcester Fire Department, I've heard him say many times that the Blue Card system, they've always been a great fire department, very aggressive. And I always say many people in the American Fire Service wouldn't be a gnat on a Worcester fireman's ass, but because they just, they did and they do a shit ton of work, and that's what they knew, and they get a ton of resources there. And, after them having the system, going through the training, and as they continue to build out their model procedures for their organization, how they use it and evolve with Blue Card, Chief Dyer says pretty regularly that the Blue Card system has allowed them to be more effective and efficient and more aggressive on the fire ground because they have a system and it's organized in how they deploy. It's not a kind of free for all that when you get here, you just do what you think needs to be done. And, we've heard that from organizations all across the country that have made the transition. And I think that there's confusion there of the unknown of the people who say Blue Card, they don't go inside. They shouldn't call it Blue Card. They should call it Pink Card. All of that shit. Well, it's something I said last week on the podcast of it's the fear of the unknown. They don't even know what it is. So they question it or they say, we're not doing that because that's just not what we do. And, the interesting thing is we have some fire departments that are in the 10 largest fire departments in the country that use the system and they do well with it. And we have organizations that are one station that run with, 10 other separate organizations when they go to a fire that do well with it. So we regularly get phone calls, and I don't want to say it's a justification, but we can line everything that we do up to standards, best practice, and the proof's in the pudding of, clearly the system works. And then I'm always willing to tell people, hey, call these organizations and talk to them about how it works for them, because we hear that would never work for us. And it's like, well, you don't even know what it is and why the system is the way that it is. But oftentimes that's just the easy answer of we just do what we do when we get there and it just works out. And, in our company, we call that accidental success, and accidental success is not forever.
Yeah. I think on the curriculum side of it, the one thing I'm most comfortable and confident in is that it's all explainable. It is all logical, and we can connect it to actual real instances of success when it's used appropriately, correctly, and effectively. And we can connect it to times where, a department or firefighters have not been successful. They have not been effective. We can connect the vast majority of the time for the lack of a system in an organization there, right? And no use of logic there. And so it makes it very easy to actually explain what it is we do. I get it. I've been in and around it. I've been around it my whole career. I'm coming up on 35 years of being in and around this system. But it has only gotten better, and it has only become more explainable to anybody. And the proof is being able to teach somebody on day one who doesn't know shit about this to on day 3 in a certification lab or day 5 in a train the trainer to actually be able to have them using it effectively, obviously in a training environment, and then them being able to turn around and teach it to somebody else. Because it's consistent, it's process. It's not how I feel about it. It's not how any individual feels about it. It's we're teaching you a system. But the important part of that is in our system and in our world, who's actually doing that? So the credibility and the competency that we have of our instructors to actually be able to go out and deliver that is, so we get asked, and Josh probably more than me, but hey, how do I get to do what you guys do there in Blue Card? And, at first my answer was always, hey, as soon as I figure it out, I'll let you know. But that's not a great answer. The answer is, and the standard answer is now, is the first thing you have to do is actually send us audio of you and or the folks that you're responsible for in your organization using it and using it effectively. Is demonstrate that you actually know and understand this system, that you believe in it enough to actually have taught it correctly, and that now you are executing it effectively in the real world when there's actually shit on fire and there's legitimate life safety concerns and you have firefighters working in the hazard zone. That's how you get to be this. And I can really say very confidently the folks that we teach with, that are the lead instructors that go out and help other people become instructors, or they train other instructors, have that legitimacy behind them. They can actually say and prove and lay out clean evidence of, no, I understand the system because this is the way we use it. And that's incredibly powerful. Very, very few places can actually talk about that or demonstrate that with the folks that are actually delivering it. So having solid information and a solid foundation to it, and then having credible, competent people who can deliver it effectively. That's why I'm here. That's why I believe in it. That's why I've invested the time, energy, and commitment to it that I have. And so that's one of the things that actually makes me most proud of it.
Yeah, that whole proof thing, Worcester Fire Department, Gary Fleischer, right? Like, we got audio, like, from them, quite a bit of audio of them utilizing the system. Cobb County sends us something on the regular of them, right? Typically it's a rescue or strategic shift or something. Kevin Alexander at Houston Fire Department, and I think when you got 88 battalion chiefs or whatever they have there, it's really hard to turn that ship of 4,500 people or whatever, but he clearly, everybody in his entire district understands and uses the system, right? We've used that audio. The Lincoln, Nebraska folks, same thing. Sean Glazer at Vandenberg, some of the best residential audio we ever had. And, people laugh like, oh, Vandenberg Air Force Base, whatever. And it's like, no, they committed to the system and they used the system. And a house fire isn't a big deal when you're used to fighting hundreds of thousands of acres or whatever how many ever acre fires that they go to, regularly, and, applying the system to that as well. So yeah, I think we're in a position that we validate and vet the knowledge, skill, and ability and credibility of the people who are delivering the program. And all of our lead instructors are also committed to being lifelong learners, because we're constantly updating and evolving and connecting with them on what we do and how we do it to make sure that it is meeting the current standards and the needs of all the organizations out there that utilize the system. So, and none of us have that hoorah, almightier than mighty piece. We want to train and educate people. We don't need to yell at anybody in the classroom to motivate them to complete and be successful with the blue card system.
There is a certain style of a blue card instructor that complements the entire package when it comes to learning package. And yeah, definitely not a revival. This is not the revival. Any final thoughts on this topic, or anything that you want to talk about today before we wrap it up and get to our timeless tactical truth?
We can't be afraid of it. We cannot. We have to embrace the training and everything that's going on around us. Our participation, our vetting of the systems, and where we send people will support the ones that are doing a good job, and it will cause the ones who are not or lack the foundation to wither, right? And that's kind of it's a free market system, right? Mm-hmm. And so let's support that. And as organizations, we should don't you fight against it, man. You're fighting against the tide. You're not going to win. Figure out how to be successful with it and integrate it, and you'll end up with better firefighters, and you'll actually end up with firefighters who are more engaged and interested and don't feel like you're constantly trying to undercut them.
You guys have time for timeless tactical truth?
Darn straight.
All right, let's do it. Timeless Tactical Truth from Alan Brunacini. The Timeless Tactical Truths books are available at bshifter.com. Get them now. And today's Timeless Tactical Truth: something is wrong if you keep inheriting bad situations. You will continue to be such a recipient until you fix what's wrong.
Well, I'm going to say, if you keep inheriting bad situations, you need to look at what and how you are training your folks. Because if they are in a position because you have bad decisions or bad positions because they're making poor decisions, or they're ineffectively operating, or they're conducting, they're working in an unsafe manner, that's a you problem. That's an organization problem. That's a boss level issue, right? And that has to get fixed at your level and down, right? As Garrison will say, the fish stinks from the head down, right? So if that's an issue, then you've got to look at, what are we teaching? How are we teaching it? How are we reviewing performance? How are we correcting performance? And how are we, kind of completing that circle and making sure that we're being more effective at talking about when we do a good job versus when we aren't. And so I can't, I think there'd be poor of us to actually look at this and say that's anything but a leadership problem to begin with. And now you can have poor performers, but we typically know how to work on those poor performers dealing with specific tasks. But a lot of times the most important tool that those bosses should have is a mirror.
Well, guys, thanks for a great topic today. And I think we'll probably have a part 2 at some point, because there's plenty more to talk about, but just scratching the surface. We appreciate everyone listening today to the B Shifter podcast. Hey, make sure, again, subscribe, like it, share it with your friends. Until next time, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you later.